Welcome, guys, to another midnight story. But tonight is not like the others. You shouldn't have come here. The shadows are watching your every step. The wind whispers secrets you were never meant to hear. Every creak, every rustle could be your last dot. Do you feel it? The darkness moving just behind you. Welcome to the Midnight Story.
8 scary true tales of strange figures in Blue Ridge Trails. Horror stories. Story 1, The Woman Beneath the Switchback Curve. It was late October when I decided to hike the Bluff Ridge Trail just north of Boone. The colors were at their peak, leaves all shades of blood and fire, crisp wind threading through the branches like a warning that winter was close behind. I was staying in a friend's cabin for a few days, hoping to clear my head after a rough few months, job gone sideways, relationship even worse. I figured a few solo hikes, a warm fire, maybe a couple of local beers, and I'd be okay again. I'd heard from a guy at the general store that there was a side trail off Bluff Ridge that led to an overlook even the locals didn't talk about much. Said it was the best view of the whole Blue Ridge, but the rangers stopped maintaining it years back. Something about erosion and unpredictable terrain, whatever that meant. I marked it on my map, packed light, and set out mid-morning. The first few miles were uneventful, just the usual quiet trail sounds, birds overhead, squirrels darting across leaf fall, my boots brushing frost off the underbrush. It was peaceful, but not in a soft way. More like the forest was holding its breath. I kept walking until I reached the junction where the old marker, half buried in moss, pointed to the Overlook Trail. The path from there narrowed, weaving tight between oaks and laurels. About a half-mile in, it curved sharply into a switchback, a steep drop just to the side. That's when I saw her. She stood below me on the lower turn of the switchback, not 10 yards away. A woman, thin, dressed in what looked like a long, pale coat or dress, with the hood up. At first I thought she might be a hiker who'd stopped for a break, maybe taking in the view, but she wasn't looking out. She was staring up, right at me, not moving, not swaying like someone trying to keep balance, just perfectly still, like she'd been waiting. I gave a small wave and said something like, "You good down there?" But she didn't answer. Her face was hidden by the hood, but I could just barely make out her chin, sharp, motionless. A shadow beneath the fabric, not even a blink. Something in me said to turn around, not out of fear, just this deep, marrow-level sense that something wasn't right. Still, curiosity got the better of me. I rounded the switchback slowly, boots crunching softly on the gravel. By the time I got to where she'd been standing, there was nothing, not even a footprint in the soft earth, and the trail was so narrow there wasn't anywhere to step off without tumbling into the bramble below. I stopped, my heart starting to kick a little. I waited, listening. No footsteps, no snapping branches, just wind. I called out again. "Hello?" A little louder this time. Nothing. I figured maybe I'd imagined her, or she'd turned off the trail and I just hadn't noticed. Still, I picked up my pace. I didn't linger at the overlook when I finally reached it, just snapped a quick photo and turned back. The sun had started to slip behind the trees, and I didn't want to be stuck on a barely used trail after dark. I set up camp a mile or so down from the switchback, just off the main loop. I've solo camped dozens of times. I know the sounds. Animals in the brush, shifting winds, trees creaking. But that night, the silence was too deep. Even the owls stayed quiet. I built a small fire, ate jerky and beans, and climbed into my tent early. I didn't expect sleep to come easy. But it did, until it didn't. I woke up sometime after midnight. I know that because my watch had gone dark, like it had died. The fire was out, and the air had gone freezing cold. But that wasn't what woke me. It was a sound, low, drawn out, almost like humming. It wasn't coming from far off. It was just outside the tent flap. I froze. The sound kept going, steady, like someone gently humming a lullaby just barely off key. I don't know how long I laid there before I finally moved. I unzipped the flap slowly, heart pounding so loud I thought she'd hear it. She was sitting right outside my tent. Cross-legged, hood is still up. That same pale coat. Her hands resting lightly on her knees. She didn't look at me, didn't stop humming. Her head was tilted slightly downward, like she was deep in thought. The firelight must have caught her face, because at that moment, I saw it. It wasn't wrong, exactly. It was just blank. No expression, no life. Her eyes looked like they'd been open too long, like she hadn't blinked in hours. The humming grew louder. I shut the flap, held it closed, and waited for sunrise. I don't remember sleeping again. Just remember watching that faint outline of her shadow through the fabric. She never moved, never left. But when the first light broke through the trees, she was gone. I packed everything in minutes. Left breakfast uneaten. I hiked out fast, not caring about the noise I made or the trail signs. When I reached the car, my hands shook so bad I dropped the keys twice before starting the engine. I didn't talk about it for a while. Not until I ended up in a little bar near the ranger station weeks later. I'd gone to ask about that trail, about whether it had been closed off because of wildlife or danger. I just wanted some kind of explanation. There was an old ranger sitting near the back, sipping from a chipped mug. I asked him if he knew the trail and told him about the switchback. He didn't say much, just nodded slowly and muttered, "They always see her on that bend, right before they don't come back." I asked him what he meant. He shrugged. "Some of us think she's looking for someone, or waiting. Doesn't matter. You saw her. Most don't leave once they do." He stood, paid his tab, and left. Didn't even look back. Sometimes, late at night, I dream about her sitting there again, not moving, just watching me sleep. I'll wake up and check the tent flap, just in case. But the dreams feel closer now, like she's waiting for something. Or maybe I never really left. Story 2, the man holding the lantern. Too still. I've never been great with direction. Grew up in the foothills, spent most of my life in the Carolina woods, but still, give me a fork in the trail with no signpost and I'll pick the wrong path 9 times out of 10. That's how I ended up turning around in Linville Gorge one October evening. I'd been hiking solo, trying to reach Table Rock before nightfall, but somewhere after the Spence Ridge split, I got cocky. Decided to bushwhack a shortcut I saw on an old forum thread. Dumb move. I lost the path within 20 minutes, and the sun was already starting to sink behind the tree line. It gets darker in those woods than most folks realize. There's a kind of quiet that creeps in. Not peaceful, more like waiting. I tried retracing my steps, but the ground all looked the same. The rock outcrops, the low brush, the deadfall. It all turned on me, like the forest had shifted while I wasn't looking. I had enough battery left in my headlamp to get me through a few hours maybe, but panic was starting to gnaw. That's when I saw the light. It was faint at first, like a firefly caught in a jar, but steady. Yellow-orange, soft glow. Maybe 100 yards ahead beneath a sloped ridge. A man was standing under the ledge, holding a lantern in one hand. It didn't flicker, it didn't move. The whole scene felt too still, like a photograph. I should have felt relieved seeing another person. But I didn't. The moment I spotted him, I got this sensation in my gut. Not fear exactly, but a kind of pressure, like my body knew something my brain hadn't caught up to yet. I called out, just a quick, "Hey, you okay?" Nothing loud or desperate. The kind of tone you use with strangers when you're not sure if they want to be bothered. He didn't respond, didn't even flinch. Then, slowly, he turned, not like a man, but like a marionette. His feet didn't shift. His torso just twisted toward me. His head lagged a second behind. I froze. We stood there in silence. 20, maybe 30 seconds. I could barely make out his face, shadowed by the lantern's glow, but it looked pale, slack. Then, without a word, he started walking. Not toward me. Away, back into the trees, deeper into the brush. No trail in sight. And I followed him. I don't know why. I still think about that sometimes. I wasn't trying to be rescued. I wasn't thinking at all, honestly. Just walked after him like I was being pulled. The forest around us got darker as we moved. My own headlamp felt dimmer now, like his light was swallowing mine. He never looked back, never stumbled, never changed pace, just glided through the brush with that lantern held high and stiff. We passed between two massive rocks, like jaws cracked open, past a creek I didn't remember crossing before. The trees bent weird in that stretch, all leaning the same way, like they were bowing to something. I started to feel like I'd been walking for hours. My legs were heavy, eyes blurry. I never remember stopping, never remember turning around, just black. When I opened my eyes, it was morning, grey-blue sky above. I was lying on the side of a gravel road, head pounding, fingers stiff with cold. My backpack was gone, my phone too. My boots were soaked to the ankle with creek water, even though I hadn't crossed a creek. Not that I remember. My jacket smelled like old smoke. Not mine. I stood up slowly, trying to piece together how far I'd gone. A mile, maybe 2 from the trailhead. There were no tire tracks, no signs of a ranger or rescue, just me and that stretch of dirt road like I'd been dropped there. I walked until I found a gas station with a payphone, called a buddy to come get me, didn't say much, just told him I'd gotten turned around. I didn't talk about what I saw. Not at first. You learn real quick in these parts who you can talk to about strange things in the woods, and who'll chalk it up to too much whiskey and not enough sleep. But about a year later, I was back in Linville, grabbing coffee from this hiker-friendly breakfast joint off 181. An older guy, maybe in his 60s, was sitting by the window, spreading peanut butter on a cracker like it was a ritual. He saw the patch on my jacket from the Table Rock Trail and nodded like we shared some kind of silent fraternity. He asked how far I'd gone. I kept it vague. Told him I'd gotten a little turned around near Spence Ridge once and ended up finding my way back somehow. I didn't expect what he said next. You see the lantern, man. I felt my mouth go dry. I hadn't told anyone about the light. He just said it, casual as can be, like asking if I'd seen a white-tailed deer. I didn't answer at first, just looked at him. He went on, spreading another cracker. He's been seen for decades, always just at dusk. Folks think he's some old ranger or moonshiner, depending on who you ask. But that ain't right. He doesn't talk, doesn't help. Just walks you off the trail. I asked him how he knew. He leaned in, looked me dead in the eye. My brother followed him. 1982. I didn't come back for 2 days. Came back with no shoes, no memory of how he got to the road. Same thing you're saying. Pale man. Lantern. Too still. He paused, tapping the edge of his cracker on the table like it helped him think. They say he shows up for people that ain't lost. People that think they are, but really just don't want to go back to whatever they left behind. I don't know what I left behind that day. I wasn't running from anything, not that I knew of. But I think about that light. How steady it was. Like it didn't need to flicker, like it wasn't real fire. And I think about the way he turned, like something that had forgotten how a person's body is supposed to move. There are nights I wake up and smell smoke. Not campfire smoke, but old, damp smoke, like something burned wet wood a long time ago. And sometimes, just before sleep, I'll see that soft orange glow behind my eyelids. Holding still, I've been back to Linville Gorge twice since then. Never alone. And never past the switch at Spence Ridge, because I know if I ever see that lantern again, I won't just follow. I won't be coming back. Story 3, she walked on the quiet side. I'd hiked the Blue Ridge off and on since I was a kid. My dad used to take me up along the parkway in early spring when the dogwoods bloomed and the air still held winter's bite. We'd bring trail mix in plastic bags and sit by creeks with names like Wolf Den and Cold Pine, chewing jerky and tossing pebbles into the current. After he passed, I kept going, mostly solo, mostly quiet. It became a thing I did when life got heavy. Some folks drink or dig into church. I lace up boots and disappear for a few days. That trip was supposed to be just that. A long weekend out of cell range, nothing fancy. I parked at a small pull-off near Craggy Gardens and headed in with a paper map, compass, and my old Kelty pack. I wasn't planning anything off-trail, just loop around the East Ridge, maybe camp by the Black Balsam shelter, and head back before Monday. The weather was holding steady, no rain, mid-50s, leaves are just turning. The kind of air that makes your lungs feel cleaner with every breath. About 4 hours in, I stopped for water near a thick grove where the trail narrowed and the trees grew close together as if the forest was hunching over the path. That's when I dropped my map. The wind caught it, strange because I hadn't felt a breeze all day, and it fluttered down off the edge of the trail into a dense patch of rhododendron. I cursed, checked my footing, and stepped off to retrieve it. Maybe 20 feet in, I stopped. The world around me had changed in a way I didn't quite understand. No birds. No squirrels, not even the wind in the leaves. The kind of silence that felt layered, too deep, like being underwater. My boots no longer crunched, the leaves didn't make a sound. I bent down, picked up the map, and that's when I saw her. She was maybe 30 feet away, standing between two mossy rocks, pale dress that brushed her ankles, long hair that hung like wet string. Her skin had a grey cast to it, and she wasn't wearing shoes, just standing barefoot on the needles and loam. Her eyes were open, wide, too wide, and she didn't blink, not once. I should have said something. Asked if she was okay. But when I opened my mouth, the words died before they reached my throat. It was like trying to speak in a dream. I tried again, louder this time, but my voice came out wrong, muffled, like I was talking through a wall. She tilted her head, the way she moved after that. I don't know how to explain it. It wasn't fast, it wasn't threatening, but it wasn't right. Her legs moved stiffly, each step like she was trying to remember how joints worked, like someone pantomiming what walking should look like. Her arms hung limp, then slowly raised, reaching out, almost gently. I didn't think so. I just ran. My feet pounded the ground in complete silence. No snapping twigs, no labored breath, not even the rush of blood in my ears. Just the feeling of motion and a growing pressure in my chest like something was closing in. I pushed through brush, branches clawing at my arms until I hit the trail again, and when I did, sound returned. A bird called sharply above me, leaves rustled underfoot. My breath came back in a gasp. I turned around, expecting to see her just behind me, but the underbrush was empty. I kept walking, didn't stop for another mile. Heart hammering the whole way. That night, I didn't set up camp. I slept on the porch of an abandoned fire watch cabin halfway up the trail, if you can call what I did sleeping. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw her face. Not scary, not even angry, just blank, like she didn't know what she was or how she'd gotten there. The next morning, I hiked out without breakfast. Didn't bother with the rest of the loop. Just wandered off the mountain. It wasn't until I got back to the lot that I noticed the map. The one I dropped. It wasn't in my pack. It wasn't anywhere. A few days later, back in Asheville, I tried to find the section of trail where it happened. I marked out my route on a topo map and traced the side path where I'd gone after the paper, but the elevation didn't match. The turnoff wasn't there. I asked 2 different rangers. One just shrugged, said there's a lot of unmarked old game trails out that way. The other one got quiet, asked me if I'd heard the quiet. His exact words. I nodded, and he nodded back like we were both in on some awful secret. Then he walked off. I went back once, just to prove to myself it had been real. It was a bright Saturday, early summer. I retraced my steps with a fresh map, carefully checking each split, every clearing. But the grove wasn't there. No rhododendron wall, no steep dip where I'd lost the map. Just trail, normal trail. I spent 4 hours circling the same ridges, hoping for that wrong silence. It never came. I've told a few people since then. Most smile politely or nod and change the subject. One guy, an old hunter I met in Yancey County, listened, eyes flat the whole time. When I finished, he said, "There's places up there where the world's thinner, like the sound doesn't carry right. I've been there once. Once is enough." He didn't say more. Sometimes I hear that silence again, usually late at night when the wind dies down and the hum of the fridge cuts off. It's like my ears are waiting for something, some absence, and in those moments I swear I can feel her near, not moving, not breathing, just waiting, like she's still there, on the quiet side, walking slowly toward me in a world where sound has no place. Story 4. He sat beside the trail at dawn. I started early that morning, well before the sun broke the tree line. It was the kind of dark that feels like a held breath, with everything around you still half asleep, even the wind. The plan was simple. A long loop starting at the Craggy Gardens trailhead, hike east toward the overlook, then break south down a back path toward my truck parked off a Forest Service road. I'd mapped it out 2 nights earlier, checked the weather, dry, low 60s, clear skies. Perfect day to get a few quiet hours in before the weekend crowds arrived. The trailhead was empty when I pulled in, the gravel still slick with dew. I strapped on my pack, tightened the laces on my boots, and started walking without much thought. The trees were still shadows then, and the forest around me hadn't yet decided to wake. I've always loved that hush, the way it holds you, makes you part of something older and still breathing. But that morning, something about it felt different. Not bad, just watchful. About a half-mile in, I saw him. A man sitting cross-legged just off the right side of the trail, maybe 10 feet into the underbrush. I stopped out of instinct, thinking maybe he needed help. His clothes were strange, not just old, but old in the wrong way. Faded brown pants, wool suspenders, a shirt buttoned all the way to his throat like something from an old portrait. His hands were folded gently in his lap, fingers laced like someone mid-prayer. I said, "Good morning," soft but loud enough to carry. He didn't move, didn't flinch, didn't look up. I waited a second, then walked on, boots crunching on the damp leaves. About a mile later, I came around a curve thick with pine and caught movement from the corner of my eye. There he was again. Same man, same clothes, same position, same distance off the trail. I stopped. My breath caught in my throat for a second. Not because I was scared exactly, but because I knew that wasn't possible. He'd have had to bushwhack uphill through dense forest and move fast without making a sound. And even then there was no way he'd end up in the exact same pose. I stared for a bit. This time I didn't say anything. His eyes were still shut, or so I thought. I kept moving. The forest felt heavier now. Not quiet, but muffled. The sounds were still there, a bird call here, a rustle there, but like they were coming from far away, behind something. I picked up my pace. About 20 minutes later, near a small clearing with a crooked cedar in the middle, I saw him again. Same pose, same spot off the trail, as if the forest itself was repeating. I stopped, really stopped this time, sat on a nearby log, pulled out a protein bar I had no intention of eating, and watched him. Nothing moved, not a twitch of the hand, not a shift in breathing. He looked planted. I don't know how long I sat there. The sun was rising behind the trees now, casting long shadows across the trail. I thought about calling out again, asking who he was, but the words stayed lodged. Something in my gut told me he was waiting for me to do exactly that. So I stood, walked on, didn't look back. The fourth time I saw him, I was already sweating. I'd taken a long turn toward the southern ridge, but the terrain hadn't changed. Same incline, same trail width, same underbrush. It felt like I hadn't gone anywhere, and there he was, again, cross-legged, still, just off the path. This time his eyes were open, pale, washed out, like river stones left too long in the sun. They weren't blinking. They were looking at me. I stopped. He moved his lips. Not a word, just the motion. But I swear to God, I understood what he said. Stay, that was it. No threat, no tone, just a whisper without sound, carried across 10 feet of damp leaves like it came from the soil. Not him. I backed up a step, then another. I didn't turn around until I was far enough away that the trees covered him again. Then I turned and walked, fast, not running, back the way I came. The trail didn't feel the same heading back. It stretched in strange ways, turned when I didn't remember it turning. The sun stayed low behind the clouds. Shadows clung longer than they should have. I passed the same fallen log 3 times before I stopped and took a breath, trying to center myself. I felt like I was inside a loop, like something in those woods didn't want me to leave, but I kept walking. Eventually, after what felt like hours but couldn't have been more than one, I reached the parking lot. My truck sat where I left it, streaked with bird droppings and morning pollen. The dew had burned off. The breeze had returned, but I didn't feel right. Even now, weeks later, I still don't. I've tried to hike since. Other trails, safer ones, but sometimes I'll see him. Not fully, just a glimpse. A man-shaped stillness in the corner of my eye, just off-path. I'll blink, and it's gone. And sometimes when I wake up before dawn, I'll find myself sitting up in bed, cross-legged, hands folded in my lap, body stiff with cold, like I'm waiting for something I don't remember agreeing to. I haven't gone back to Craggy Gardens. I don't plan to, because I think if I see him again and he opens his eyes like that, pale and knowing, I won't be able to walk away. I think I'll sit down too, just off the path. Same distance, same pose, waiting. Story 5. Voices came from the closed shelter. The lean-to wasn't even part of my original plan. I was halfway through a 2-day hike in Pisgah, cutting across one of the lesser marked ridges to avoid the switchback crowds. The map I had, old, laminated, corners curling, showed the lean-to as a faded square with the word closed stamped next to it. Weather damage, maybe. Most folks passed it by, and I only remembered it when the rain started to fall. Not a drizzle, but a sudden cold wall of water that rolled in off the hills like it had been waiting for me. I'd been walking alone for 6 hours by then. I hadn't seen another soul all morning. The trail was narrow, the trees tight, and by the time the storm hit, I didn't have the energy to pitch my tarp. I remembered the shelter. It was only a few minutes off the ridge, nestled down a slope of pine and soft clay. I told myself I'd check it out. Just see how bad the damage was. Even before I saw it, I could feel something off in the air. You know how a forest smells during rain, soil, moss, bark, but here it smelled muted, like the rain didn't quite reach the ground. Like something had swallowed the scent before it could form. The lean-to came into view through the trees, slouched to one side, blackened by mildew and time. The roof partially collapsed, and the walls bowed outward like they'd been pushed, but it was still standing, barely. Then I heard the voices. At first, just a low murmur. Then laughter, then crying. They came not from inside the lean-to, but around it, like someone had set up a camp and was swapping stories under the shelter of trees. But there was no firelight, no figures, nothing moved, just sound. I ducked behind a pine. Pack still strapped, and watched. The laughter was soft, too soft for how close it sounded. A woman, maybe two, giggling like kids behind a curtain. Then, broken by hiccuping sobs, a man, deep, rasping, then silence, then all of it again, cycling through in no order. The sound didn't carry like it should. It felt pinched, like it was coming through a straw, the kind of thing that makes your stomach go cold. I waited there, not moving, for at least an hour, long enough for the rain to turn to mist. I kept expecting someone to step out, to walk around the edge. Even a deer or raccoon would have made more sense than nothing at all, but no one did. Eventually, I stood. My legs were stiff, soaked through. The shelter was maybe 30 feet away. I thought about just walking up, calling out, maybe knocking on one of the walls like it was a damn front door. But when I took a step forward, something in me twisted. My vision pulled ever so slightly to the side, like I was being turned. Not physically, deeper than that. Like a compass needle swinging against its will. It wasn't fear, not exactly. It was wrong. Like whatever was inside that shelter didn't belong to this place, or this time, and being near it made the body want to go still. So I didn't move closer. I turned and followed the long trail back up the slope, taking the wide way around, my ears still ringing with the sound of laughter that wasn't laughter and crying that never ended. The moment I was out of sight, the sounds stopped altogether. I didn't speak that night, even when I made camp in a grove a good 2 miles away. Didn't build a fire, didn't eat, just sat there, staring into the dark, replaying the voices in my head, trying to figure out how they had echoed without direction. Sleep, when it came, didn't feel like sleep. It felt like I was somewhere else entirely. In the dream, I was standing inside the lean-to, except it wasn't ruined. The walls were whole, the roof solid. Candles burned along the walls, low and wax-dripped. I couldn't see anyone, but I felt them, all around me, breathing, shifting, watching from just outside the flickering light. They whispered my name, over and over, sometimes gently, sometimes like a threat. I tried to speak, but no sound came. I turned to leave, but the doorway was gone, replaced by more walls, more shadows. I was trapped. When I woke, my blanket was tangled tight around me, and my boots were missing. I found them 20 yards away, placed neatly side by side under a pine I didn't remember setting up near. Inside one of them was a tiny knot of twine, just tied once, like the kind you'd use to close a paper bag. I didn't stay another night. I broke camp fast, skipped breakfast, and walked without rest back to the trailhead. My legs ached for days after, but I didn't care. I needed to be gone. Away. A few weeks later, back in town, I tried to find records of that shelter. Nothing recent, nothing detailed, just a few lines in an old forestry report from the 90s. Structure decommissioned after repeated unauthorized use. Unexplained incident reports. and animal interference. That was all. No specifics, no names. I asked around in a few local gear shops. Most folks didn't even know it was still standing, but one guy, older, grey beard, looked like he lived in the woods more than he lived in his house, heard me mention it and set down his coffee without blinking. "You heard 'em, didn't you?" he asked. I didn't answer. He nodded anyway. They don't talk to everyone, only those that stop too long. That lean-to's like a jar with no lid. Once you hear what's inside, it hears you too. I asked him what that meant. He just looked at me and said, "You'll find out. In time. Don't listen too close to your dreams." It's been months now. I don't hike alone anymore. I stay close to the marked trails. But sometimes, even in town, I hear them. Just faintly. Usually at night. Through the bathroom vent. From behind the wall, laughter, crying, my name. And every now and then, just before sleep, I catch a scent I can't place. Old wood smoke and mildew, the smell of a room with no windows, of a place that doesn't forget. I don't think the shelter is haunted. I think it's open, still collecting, and I think one day I'll hear the voices again. A little louder this time, and maybe then I'll go back. Story 6. The hiker who walked the wrong way. I've been hiking sections of the Appalachian Trail on and off since college, usually in short stints between work contracts. Nothing extreme, no through hikes, no ultralight madness. Just the kind of walking that keeps your head clear and your boots broken in. That season, I partnered up with a girl named Marnie. We met in a gear store outside Asheville. She was heading southbound and looking for someone to split campsites with for a stretch, and we just fell in pace. Easy to travel with, not a lot of small talk, respected quiet. We were about 3 days out from Erwin, Tennessee, when we first saw the man. It was just past dusk, those final amber minutes before the trees swallowed the light whole. We were on a lesser-used spur. The kind that parallels the main trail but sees less foot traffic. The signage was clear. Northbounders to the left, southbounders right. Everyone followed it, except him. He walked north, but against the signage, meaning he was coming from the direction nobody was supposed to. His pace was steady, unhurried. He didn't look up as he passed us. His clothes were clean but odd. Something about the cut of the jacket, the collar too stiff, the fabric too thick like it belonged to another decade. No backpack, no water bottle. Nothing to suggest he'd been out there long. I nodded. Marnie said, "Evening." He didn't answer. That was the first time. The next day, around midday, we were coming down a gentle slope through a patch of hemlocks when we saw him again. Same man, same direction, same pace, heading north against the signage, eyes forward. His shirt looked a bit wrinkled now, the collar stained faintly at the neck. Still no pack, still no gear. Marnie stopped, frowning. "Did he loop?" she asked. No way he got ahead of us. We hadn't seen any cut-offs or alternate paths. I didn't answer, just watched as he disappeared up the rise. That night, camp felt different, not unsafe exactly. Just thinner, like the woods weren't as full of life as they should have been. The frogs had gone quiet. Even the fire crackled wrong, too sharp, too hollow. Marnie kept glancing over her shoulder like she expected someone to step out from the dark. The third sighting came the next morning, just past a creek crossing, low fog clinging to the banks. He was already mid-step when we saw him, clothes now rumpled, his hair wet and stringy. He looked up this time, just for a moment. His eyes didn't hold anything in them, not tiredness, not intent, just absence. As if he wasn't walking towards something but away from everything. He passed close, closer than before. I caught the smell of him, not sweat, not dirt, something more sterile, like stone and old paper, a scent that didn't belong out there. Marnie said, "Hey, do you need help?" He didn't respond, but his lips moved, barely, a whisper more felt than heard. "Don't follow." Then he was gone. That night, the wind changed, came in low through the undergrowth, not high through the trees like usual, made the tent fabric sigh in waves. I remember the shadows seemed to stretch, like they were leaning in. At some point, I must have fallen asleep. When I woke, the fire had died and the world was quiet. No breeze, no bugs, no Marnie. Her tent was empty. Her boots were gone. At first, I thought maybe she'd stepped off to pee or check something, trail etiquette. But after 10 minutes, I started calling, quietly at first, then louder. I walked the perimeter, no sign of her. Then I saw them, her boots, placed side by side on a narrow spur trail behind camp, toes pointing north, the wrong direction, like she'd stepped out of them and walked backward into the woods. I didn't follow. I wanted to. I even took a step, but my gut clenched so hard it felt like something inside me wanted to curl away from that trail. I sat down, waited for hours, called her name until my throat was raw. She never came back. I reported her missing the next morning when I hit a ranger station. The rescue teams searched for a week. Nothing. Not a footprint, not a scrap of gear. They asked me to walk them through the days before. I told them everything, except about the man, about the boots. They would have said she got turned around, panic, injury, exposure. Happens out here more than folks realize, but that wasn't it. She hadn't panicked. She'd walked, calm, silent, northbound on a trail where no one walks north. Weeks later, I was back in town. I kept to myself, mostly. Then, in a cafe, I overheard 2 hikers talking. One was a woman, maybe in her 50s. She said she'd seen a man out past Wesser Bald, no pack, walking the wrong way. She joked that he must have forgotten something 20 years ago and was still trying to find it. I interrupted, asked what he looked like. She described him, down to the collar, the walk, the silence. "Did he say anything?" I asked. She shook her head, didn't even look at me, just passed by. But something in her face told me she wasn't saying everything. That night, I dreamed I was walking that same trail. Everything is quiet. Trees are too tall, wind pulling at my back. I followed a sound, faint, like water moving over stones. But it wasn't water, it was footsteps. Slow, measured. I came to a clearing and there she was. Marnie, standing barefoot, her back to me. Her clothes looked newer than I remembered. Her hair braided like it never had been on trail. She turned slowly. Her mouth didn't move, but I heard it. "Don't follow." I woke before dawn, sweat cold on my spine, boots by the door, facing the wrong way. I don't hike much now, not alone, not where the signage gets confusing, and if I ever see someone walking against the trail again, no gear, no words, I won't speak, because some folks aren't walking toward anything, they're walking away, and if you follow, you don't come back. Story 7, What I Found Past the Fallen Marker. It was 3 days after the storm that I headed back into Pisgah. The rain had come hard. Late summer thunder that rattled windows and turned switchbacks to soup. Most folks stayed off the trails until it dried, but I'd been restless, itching to move. So I packed light and planned a solo out and back, along a ridge spur I'd walked a dozen times before. Nothing dramatic, just a bit of elevation, a couple overlooks, and enough quiet to drain my head. The sky was clearing by the time I reached the old forestry lot. Mud clung to my boots before I even left the gravel. There's something about the woods after a storm. They smell different. Like everything's breathing again. Damp bark, cold rock, broken pine, You notice the rot more too. Mushrooms sprout fast. Trees bleed sap. It feels like the earth opens up a little more than usual. I'd been walking for maybe 2 hours when I noticed the marker. It was an old wooden trail post, split at the base and tipped at an angle, lying just off the main path near a fork that wasn't familiar. It wasn't one of the regular blaze splits. I knew those by heart. This one looked older, grown over, like the woods had tried to take it back. No signage, no color strip, just the post. Rotting and crooked, pointing east toward a narrow line of broken laurel. At first, I kept going. That's what you do. Stick to the trail. But 20 steps later, something about it tugged at me. Curiosity maybe, or just a bad instinct pretending to be a good one. I turned around and walked back to the marker. The path it pointed to dipped and curved, barely visible under ferns and leaf mold. I stood there for a long time, thumb running along the top of my trekking pole. Then I stepped off. The laurel swallowed me almost immediately. It grew thick, branches knotted at face height, and bark slick from the rain. I had to hunch, push with my forearms just to make space. It felt wrong. Not dangerous exactly. Just wrong, like a place still drying from the last time it was disturbed. The ground sloped gently down, then curved back up, tight switchbacks the size of animal tracks. No footprints, no signs of human passage at all. The deeper I went, the quieter it got. About 10 minutes in, the trail, if you could even call it that, opened into a small clearing. That's when I saw the stones. Dozens of them, maybe more. Neatly stacked piles, each about knee-high. Not natural formations. These had been placed deliberately. Flat slate, dark and weathered, stacked in towers and rows. Some formed loose circles, others formed crosses if you stood in just the right spot. The space between the piles had been cleared. No brush, no leaves, just packed earth. I stopped walking. Dead center in the clearing stood a wooden cross, not the kind you see on the roadside. Just 2 rough-cut planks tied together with fresh twine, the kind of knot that looks like it was tied slow and tight. The wood was older than the twine. One looked forgotten, the other like it had just been added. Something about that felt worse than if it had all been rotting. I didn't get closer. Couldn't. Every part of me said not to. The silence was total. No birds, no wind. The only sound was the faint creak of my pack strap when I shifted weight. I stood there, unsure how long, staring at those stones like they might rearrange themselves. I thought about taking a photo, but my hand didn't move. That was the first moment I noticed the cold. Not a cold weather, but something lower than the air should have been. Like the space was sealed off from the sun. I turned to leave. That's when I heard it. A branch cracked. Not behind me, straight ahead, just beyond the far edge of the clearing. I froze. Another crack followed, softer, like a foot slipping against moss. I scanned the stones. Between 2 piles near the tree line, I caught movement. A figure, just a glimpse. The curve of a shoulder, maybe. Human-sized, not charging, not hiding. Just there. Then, on the opposite side of the clearing, another shift. Something else, similar size, similar shape, moved behind a wide trunk. Again, not stepping out. Just there long enough for my eyes to catch the difference between bark and skin. I didn't breathe. I couldn't. They weren't talking, not moving in rhythm, just watching. I began to step backward, one slow foot at a time. My heel hit a small stone and clacked louder than I wanted. The sound felt sharp in that awful quiet. The figures didn't react. They didn't flinch or hide. It was like they didn't need to, as if I wasn't the one intruding. I was the one being considered. The thought came sudden and clear. I should not be here. I turned and pushed back through the laurel. Branches grabbed at my arms, snapping wet against my neck. I lost the trail within 5 steps. The undergrowth shifted like it was moving with me, or maybe against me. I couldn't tell. Every direction looked the same, but I picked what I thought was north and kept moving. At one point, I stopped to catch my breath and realized my shirt was soaked, not from sweat, but from mist or dew or something else entirely. Then I heard it again, behind me. A thud, not a footstep, but like something falling into soft earth. I didn't turn, just kept moving. Eventually, the trees opened up slightly. I stumbled onto gravel, a narrow forestry road, the kind you only find when you're too far from anything useful. I followed it until I saw the lot where I'd parked, though I swear it took longer getting out than getting in. I got in my truck and didn't look back at the tree line. That night, I laid out my map, spread it wide, searched the whole quadrant. There was no trail where I'd gone, no old fire route, no connector path, just a blank strip of elevation. The next morning, I asked a ranger about it, an older guy who'd worked the area since the 70s. He didn't say much. Just looked at the pin I'd placed on the map and said, "Storms kick up old things." When I asked what he meant, he just tapped the map again and said, "Best not to follow fallen markers. Not all paths are for walking." I didn't tell him what I saw, but something didn't sit right after that. I kept thinking about the twine on the cross, how new it looked, how tightly it was wrapped. Somebody had been there, maybe recently, maybe often. The dream started 2 nights later. In the first one, I was back in the clearing, but the trees were gone. Just open space and sky. Stars thick like ash falling. The stones were still there, but the cross was taller. Too tall. Twine now wrapped down its length like veins. I was barefoot, standing in the center. The ground was cold and wet. I wasn't alone. They circled me, those shapes I'd seen before. Still silent, still watching, but I could feel them closer now. I didn't try to run. I couldn't. I just stood and waited for something I didn't understand. When I woke, my socks were damp. My boots were sitting by the door, laces still tied. The dreams came again and again after that. Always the same. Sometimes I'd wake up with dirt under my nails. Once I found a scrap of twine in my sleeping bag. I keep it in a jar now, just to remind myself it happened. I haven't gone back to that ridge. I still hike, but not alone. Not without telling someone where I'm headed. I mark every trailhead. I triple check my maps. And if I ever see a trail marker down, leaning just so, pointing toward a path I don't recognize, I let it lie. Some trails vanish for a reason, and some things out there, they wait for you to find them again. Story 8. The Blue Jacket. Hung too high. I took the trail west of Asheville mostly out of boredom. Work had gone remote, and days had started to bleed together. The walls of my small apartment seemed to lean in closer every week. I wasn't sleeping well, and the hum of screens and silence had started to press against the inside of my skull, so I figured a few days in the woods might help. I didn't want anything too crowded. I asked a gear shop guy downtown if there were any lesser traveled trails near Pisgah that still had ridge access. He gave me a kind of odd look, then said, "There's one west of the parkway, past a cold ridgeline. Ain't on many lists, but it's quiet." That was enough for me. By the time I got to the trailhead, it was early afternoon. The light filtered through the canopy in a way that made everything look painted, soft, unfocused. A hush sat over the woods. Not peaceful, just still, like the forest was waiting on something. I chalked it up to the altitude and the time of year. I'd always felt something different about this part of the mountains anyway. Older, more private, like the trees themselves kept memories. The path climbed slowly, weaving along the western ridge. The wind up there had teeth, even in August. I wrapped my flannel tighter and kept moving. The deeper I went, the more I noticed that the usual sounds were gone. No birdsong, no crickets. Even the wind, for all its bite, didn't make the leaves rustle. It just moved, cold and invisible. About an hour in, I saw it. A sharp turn in the trail opened into a clearing, maybe 30 feet across. The light was strange here, faded, like the sun had slipped behind tinted glass. In the center of the clearing stood a tree, tall and dead. And hanging from one of its high limbs, maybe 20 feet up, was a jacket. Bright blue. It didn't belong. Not in a place like this. It was the kind of electric blue you'd see on the rack at an outlet store, not faded or worn. No dirt, no tears. The material looked stiff, like it had just been pulled out of a bag. It was caught perfectly, draped over the branch as if someone had stood below and tossed it, landing it like a basketball shot. I stepped closer. That's when I noticed the ground. It was too clean. All around the base of the tree for a radius of maybe 6 feet. The forest floor was swept. Leaves gone, twigs gone, just bare soil with strange, tight spirals carved into it, like something had turned there in slow circles over and over until the earth was bald and smooth. It didn't feel random. I reached for my phone, heart suddenly beating harder than I liked, snapped a picture, I checked it. What I saw made my stomach go cold, then I backed away. I didn't like the way the wind moved around me then. Tightening. I don't know how to explain it, but it felt like something had leaned in, just enough for me to sense it but not see it. I turned and walked fast. The rest of the trail was narrower, hemmed in by laurel and wet moss. It followed the ridge south until it dropped near a creek bed, where a single-room rental cabin sat under a bluff. I'd booked it for one night, just a place to sleep, no cell reception. It was the kind of place that felt safe in the daylight, but too far from anything once the sun went down. I tried to forget about the jacket. I tried to cook some beans, read a few pages of a paperback, but my mind kept going back to the photo. I looked again before bed, still blurred, still wrong. It was after midnight when I heard the sound, soft, dry, a scratch. At first I thought it might be branches shifting above the roof, but it was too steady, too slow. It moved like fingers tracing the length of a shingle, back and forth, then pause, then back again. I held my breath, then silence. I waited, barely blinking, for what must have been an hour. At some point sleep must have taken me, because the next thing I remember is the pale light of morning and the cold ache in my shoulders. I stepped outside. The wind had died. The woods were still. Then I saw the window. On the outer glass of the cabin, just above the sill, 2 muddy handprints. One on each side, long fingers, too long, spaced unnaturally wide. No palm smudge, just those 5 streaks on either side, as if someone had leaned in and looked at me while I slept. I didn't touch the prints, just stared until my breath fogged the glass and I saw myself looking back. I left within the hour, didn't eat, didn't speak, packed fast and headed back toward the trailhead. My thoughts were mud. Fear came in waves like it didn't want to let go all at once. When I passed the clearing, the jacket was gone. No blue, no cleaned earth, just leaves like everywhere else. I froze for a second, looking up, expecting maybe to see it move to another tree, but the canopy was empty. Then I noticed something else. Where the cleaned spiral had been was a pile of stones, stacked carefully, 5 in all, like a marker or a warning. I walked faster. At some point I stopped taking in details, just moving, counting steps, trying not to think about the jacket or the prints or the hand that must have made them. I reached my car by mid-afternoon and sat behind the wheel, engine off, staring through the windshield like I wasn't sure what was real anymore. That night, back home, I looked again at the photos. In the corner, barely visible between two tree trunks, just at the edge of the static distortion, was a shadow, not cast, just there, a gap where light didn't fall, a shape without detail. I zoomed in. There was a curve like a bent shoulder, a smudge near what might have been a face, or nothing at all. I'll take it. But it didn't matter, because 2 nights ago I was sleeping at my cousin's house outside Waynesville. He let me crash there while my apartment got fumigated. It was late, maybe 2 or 3 in the morning, when I heard the roof again. The scratch, that same soft, deliberate tracing motion across the shingles, just once. Then silence. I stared at the ceiling for an hour, cold sweat slicking my chest. I knew better than to look, but when the sun rose, I had to check. I opened the curtain. On the glass, handprints, fresh, mud tracked across the outer pane, 5 fingers, long, pressed gently into the window like whoever or whatever had come wasn't in a rush. It lasted all night. I haven't told my cousin. Haven't told anyone, and I haven't looked up again since. But I still feel it, something waiting, just beyond the trees, just past the frame, still watching, still walking, and still wearing that bright blue jacket.